I'm Madelyn Blair, and this is Unlocked. Now, if you're serious about your career, this show is for you because this show is all about opening possibilities so that when you're hit with the unexpected, you have options from which to choose. And speaking of choices, I'm delighted that you chose to be with us today because our topic is going to be living the life you aspire. Jane Goodall is the woman who spent years and years observing chimpanzees and apes in Africa and learned more about them than anyone ever dreamed could be learned from simply sitting with her subjects. She recently wrote a book called The Book of Hope. And by the way, I strongly recommend you get it. It's wonderful reading. And I actually have it by my bedside. So when I want to get calm at night, I just pick it up and read one of the wonderful stories in it. But anyway, coming back to the subject, when asked what is hope, she responded, "Hope is what enables us to keep going in the face of adversity. It is what we desire to happen, but we must be prepared to work hard to make it so." I pondered her words, and I realized that this is a woman who has spent more than 60 years in pursuit of helping the animals who most closely resemble us. Her university thought that her work was not sufficiently rigorous for real scientific study because she chose to sit and quietly observe the animals. Yet today, her work is considered to be masterful. At the same time, her work has never stopped. Today, she hopes and works toward the recognition that every animal on this planet is part of the environment in which we all live and breathe, and that they are essential to assure that environment continues to allow us to live and breathe. She hopes for this and works to make it so by speaking around the globe to audiences of every race, every culture, and every age. She is the embodiment of her own hope. And today, we're going to be talking about embodiment with my guest, Marietta Vis. Now, if you could ask Marietta any question, what would it be? Would you be interested in, let's say, if you really can affect embodiment? Or would you be more interested in why she's chosen this area? Take a minute and jot down your questions. And if you're watching on YouTube or LinkedIn, put your questions in the chat so that we can tackle them, because I'll be monitoring them during the show. I'll give you a minute now to write them down, so stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching or listening to Unlocked. I'm Madelyn Blair, your host, and our guest today is Marietta Vis. Welcome, Marietta, to Unlocked.
Thank you, Madeline. So great to be here.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you with us. Well, let me introduce you a little bit to our audience so they get to know why you're here. Marietta is a leadership coach, an embodied change expert, and team development facilitator. And for over 25 years, her passion has been to help individuals, leaders, teams, and organizations who want to reconnect to their purpose and to what really matters to them. I love that vision, by the way, and that goal. And I have to read a few more things about Marietta. I didn't realize this until I did some more research on her. She is a professional certified coach. She's an executive certificate in leadership coaching. She's a certified master somatic coach. We want to hear about that one. It's just amazing. Oh, and she's also a certified critical alignment yoga teacher. I want to tell you, talk about credentials, Marietta. So welcome again.
Thank you so much. Can I comment on your
Oh, yeah.
I love that because I love how you brought Jane Goodall into this talk about embodiment because as you described her, imagine her sitting, and I saw a documentary on her. It's so fabulous. Imagine her sitting, studying, right? And you said she just sat down and quietly studied.
Yeah.
And that's the essence, right? It's the essence. And it's also very interesting that it's seen as not real science at a certain time. And now we're shifting to a new paradigm. And I would say, if I can say one thing about embodiment already, is that that's what embodiment is, to sit still and observe ourselves. Of course, there's a lot more to it that we'll get to, but it's such a great link to what we're going to be talking about in relation to embodiment.
Oh, I'm thrilled. I wrote that down, to sit still and observe ourselves. That's embodiment. It's just such a simple way to say it. And you're right. I know there's much, much more.
Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of which, let's help the audience get to know you a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm curious to know what it was that led you to see and understand that we really do have a wholeness here, a mind and a body. They're not separate, they're one. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. I'll tell you a little bit about that, and also why I study so much, because I have another few certifications. I won't bore the audience with that, but just like maybe as a reference, I moved here 9 years ago from Amsterdam, the Netherlands, because I always think people hear an accent, they're like, where is this person coming from? So
it's one of my favorite places, by the way.
Oh, cool.
That's where I got my PhD, so I love Holland.
Yeah. So I had to start over. So I mean, that's one part, right? Starting over. And I'm sure, there's a lot of people who have that experience. I came to a new place. I had no network. This work is network based. So I had to start over. And I really just thought, what I love is learning. So let me just do a training and I'll get to know some people. I'd already done my 3-year teacher training, which requires like 20 hours a week. It's not, I was working and doing that side to side. And at that time, I was in a different place, very heady, critical, analytical. I studied medical psychology, right? I was in a place, and that's a way to be safe in the world. We'll talk more about that, but that place, that teaching really brought me to understanding. I was working in consulting and leadership development, that there's more to learn from listening inside, as Jane Goodall does in observing, but observing ourselves. So imagine on the yoga mat being in a long held pose where you start to notice your tendencies. And my tendency was definitely willpower, speed, moving and pushing through. So as you're standing in a pose long that's taking strength and etc., you can't do that. You're going to suffer for sure. And who wants to go through life suffering, right? So that whole study brought me, when I was in the US, I had the luck to go to the Strozzi Institute in Petaluma, California. And I encourage everyone to look them up because they're fabulous.
And by the way, that's spelled Strozzi.
Yeah. Yeah. And I got to study there, and I was like, oh, I'll do a week course, and I ended up like studying there for years to become a master somatic coach. So yeah, so the yoga really brought me there. That's and what I learned from my body as I was doing that.
Mm, I love it. So your body was one of your teachers.
Absolutely, every day.
Every day. Well, we've already talked about a quick definition of embodiment, but well, let's talk about why it is so important.
Oh yeah, it was fascinating because you see it every day. I was reading a Dutch newspaper this morning because that's what I do in the mornings. It's one of my and I read this article on research with school-aged kids, and it said that 70% of girls have psychosomatic symptoms of headache and bellyache. 50% of boys, and that's interesting. What's the difference there? And 50% is a lot too. So I'm not saying it's not an issue for boys, but there is a difference. And one of the things that showed up is that as a neuroscientist explained, women and girls from a young age, they mature a little faster than boys, right? Like, so as they're 16, they start to think more about themselves, get more self-aware, self-conscious probably also. They are really keen on kind of delivering what's expected of them. So worrying about, am I good enough, starts at a really young age, mostly for girls, because that's how the neuroscientists explained the difference between boys and girls. So his recommendation was to teach more about social emotional development in schools, and my recommendation would be teach more embodiment, because our body is our social emotional sense organ, the whole body. Right? We often think of, we have a brain, and then the body is kind of, sometimes people say like a taxi to bring your head to your meeting or something. But I mean, there's so much wisdom in the body. So as we are able to sit still and observe, we can reconnect to that wisdom. What is it we care about? What are our values? And you can imagine that, to ask the question, what is embodiment, tells really a lot about how our culture values and appreciates thinking, because whoever asks what is thinking, I love the question. Nothing wrong with that, but I just want to say that I do realize now that with COVID, with climate, like the climate, with racial injustice, with all these big societal crises that we have, I see that people are much more open and inclined to look for something more than how can we analyze this and write books about it. And books are fabulous, right? Books are fabulous to learn from, but there are certain things that we need to learn through connecting with our body. So just to give an example, how we show up in the world, our body is the domain of action, right? How we show up in the world. It will determine if people trust you. It will determine how you're connecting to other people, how you can say no and set your boundaries. All of that shows up in the body. So to be able to learn the language, so to say, of the body will enrich your life and make you more, like you said, you talk about choice, you start to have choice. If you don't do that, you'll go on autopilot. The autopilot, and we can talk more about that, is kind of like all the things we've done up until now.
Yeah.
If you take stock, but what is it that I need now in this moment? Yeah.
Oh, wow. So yeah, I'm getting the sense that this is a really important topic, a really important area for us to explore. Okay, I'm going to challenge you.
Okay.
You talked generally about how you recognized that embodiment was important, but I'm going to challenge you to find a specific moment, a time in your life when embodiment all of a sudden, oh my goodness, this is real. It made real sense to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'll just speak out loud what I'm doing now to get to that answer, because that says something about what embodiment is, because I can easily start to talk from my head, right? It's a different place to talk from the felt sense of an
Mhm.
experience. So let me take a moment, and what I do, and maybe you can join me, is to just breathe, and on my exhale, I soften the muscles. I breathe in and I connect to my heart and just see what arises from there. So actually, it's funny because what arises, and this memory, even though I wrote about it yesterday, was kind of I wasn't having access to it as you first asked the question. By taking that pause, I can reconnect to it. So it's really about, I would say the moment is preparing. It was, let's say, yesterday, right? And I know it first makes sense like years ago, 15 years ago, but I do want to go to this moment because it so illustrates what it's about for me and how it's alive for me at this very moment. So preparing for this, you had sent me some questions, right, to kind of ponder and consider, so that I, knew kind of where we were going, and of course there's improv as well, but right. Um, and I started to notice that I was grabbing all these books that I have, and I have tons of books about embodiment. So I was like, I need to read up on this because do I really know what this is about? So I was getting activated, as we call it. And what got activated in me, and that's kind of the work I've done over the years, is this sense that what I have now is not enough. There needs to be more for me to be seen as worthy, as you know uh, I know what I'm talking about. So
Mhm.
I then distance myself from myself, and I kind of say, usually it's almost like I live a little bit in front of myself, and I try
Yeah,
to
yeah.
catch up with myself, but I'm
Mhm.
here, and that's not me. So it's I'm moving in the wrong direction by grabbing books. And that brought me really to, and I write about that in my newsletter. I wrote, is that brought me back to this moment where I did my first speech in school. I was 10 years old. And, in the Netherlands, I'm sure it's done in the US as well. It's probably better anyway, but that's another story. I was 10 years old. I had prepared a speech, and I was one of those girls that was like, okay, what's expected of me? I have to get all these books from the library. I see myself sitting on my bed, a stack of books on horses, and I'm preparing, and I'm kind of excited about it, and I wanted to share because I loved horses. I wasn't like a horse. I love them. I wanted to share about them. But little did I know that if I take one sentence out of the book out of context, and that would make a very different impression on like what what the real meaning was. So there was something about that. So I had delivered the speech. I looked up at my teacher, and I was expecting praise and like, oh, good job, and your first speech. And so instead, he walked up briskly to the desk, and he was like scolding me for not doing a good job. And so it's interesting because how that lives in me, I can still feel an
Yeah,
emotional
yeah.
activation, because and that's what happens. It lives in the body. That makes an imprint. It's not just a thought. It's really, there's an emotional component to it. So how I relate that to today is like I'm kind of standing up to give a speech. It's different. It's a conversation, but this preparing for today reminded me of that moment, and not in a way of, oh, I remember. I think it's more like I saw myself grabbing for books. I started to move away from myself and what I know. So then maybe the interesting thing is, how do I shift back? Because that's all it is, right? It's like noticing, having the awareness,
Mhm.
knowing your shaping history of activations. Like, where did that pattern of wanting to be really good and finding it in ways to prepare with books and getting all the latest research, um, that's a habit that's not serving me in this moment talking to you. So
Yeah.
going back is really going into the body. I mean, it's ridiculously simple and it's so powerful.
I have to tell you, Marietta, this exercise was astounding for me because what came up for me was a time when my daughter was about 13, 14,
Mm,
and she fainted.
mm.
Now, I could tell you, and I felt it as we were doing this. I
Yeah.
felt this enormous clench in my gut. And I said, oh my goodness, this child is important to me. But it wasn't up here. It was my whole self was saying, this child is important. Whew.
Yeah, that's so such a beautiful example. And um you know, I mean, you are clearly in tune with that because you're noticing it. It can also be that you've shielded, and I was one of those. So I'm not talking about others. I know the experience shielded so much that I actually couldn't feel anymore. I couldn't reach into what matters to me.
Yeah.
So I love how you're saying that because that must mean that you are so connected to that, right? But when we're under pressure, we often kind of, we get this defense mechanisms, and then it becomes very hard to feel what's important to you.
Yeah.
And I think that's a shame. That's a shame.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, wow. What a deep sharing. Thank you so much. I think I'm really beginning to feel this.
Yeah.
Now, in your current work, you talk about living the life you aspire.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit more about what that means and its relationship to embodiment.
Yeah, I'd love to. And I work with one-on-one with leaders. I work with men and women, and I this program, I created a program, Live the Life You Aspire. And it's really, I think it's almost like a statement of where I am now, and I'm still working it. It's a lifelong learning. But for a lot of us, we do what we think is expected, right? There's three basic needs that we humans have. It's safety, it's belonging, and it's dignity.
Mm.
And the safety, right, kind of, has also this kind of downside that we're looking for that because when we're young and, we want to belong, we feel like through belonging, we experience safety. We are almost ready to give up our authenticity, like what it is that we really want to have that appreciation and support
Mm-hmm.
our direct family, our teachers. So that being seen, um, that longing to be seen is so important, and longing to be acknowledged. I can give an example of that because maybe this sounds a little abstract, but let's say you're crying. Like in my example with my teacher, I actually cried and he sent me out of the classroom. He's like, I'm not having this in my classroom. You go stand in the hall. So that's a whole other part of that story. But so I could say, like, to cry in public still, I think it's totally fine for people to cry in public. But I often feel like, oh gosh, wait, I feel my tears welling up. Just now I had a little bit of that and like, oh, can show that here. That's a shaping.
Yeah.
I've been told if you cry, you're not welcome here by him in that one moment.
Yeah.
He's an authority figure. I'm 10, he's my teacher.
Yeah.
So that means that after that, if I don't, if you process it, it's not that, but it's a small thing. I'm not saying it's a big thing for me, but it is very true that now when I cry, I feel that same thing. I need to leave. So if I can't stand up and move out of this room because I'm here doing an interview with you, I will if I don't know how to not do that, I'll dissociate from myself.
Yeah.
Right? So that's leaving as well. I'll be still here physically, but
Yeah.
I'll be gone. I'm not present. My connection to you will be so different.
Wow.
So to live the life you aspire is to know your history, to know which moments in your life have shaped you in a way that prevents you from doing the things that you care about, that are important to you. And I find that a lot of us are pushing ourselves to be successful by standards, not from within, but from outside somewhere. We all have our own, people and standards that we're looking up to. And I think you can be successful and be fulfilled and be at ease. But what you need for that is to touch base with
Mm.
what do I care about? How do I want to be seen? And that at a certain point in your life, those old patterns that served you well, they kept you safe. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
They are very important. But at a certain point in life, you no longer need that kind of protection. And then they're getting in the way. So in this living the life you aspired, it's totally an embodied journey to understand, to feel into, and then to shift away and create new practices.
Yeah. You know, I have to stop you and intervene here.
Yeah.
This is so exciting to hear what you're saying, because one of the practices that I talk about in my book Unlocked is to write a personal story every day.
Mm-hmm.
And as you accumulate them over time and you read across them, you go, wow, that's why I don't want to cry in public, you know, or whatever it is, because you begin to see those forming moments.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing after this simple exercise that I'm going to add this breathing a bit and getting present and letting the story pop up, because I haven't thought about my daughter's fainting in, I can't remember the last time I thought about it.
Yeah.
But what a great story
Yeah.
to write about, for me to remember. That's part of what formed me as a mother.
Yeah. Beautiful. And I love that how you approach resilience from such a, you may not call it embodied, but the practices, right? The embodied, the perspective of we always practice something, and to get aware of that is super important. So, can I ask you, what did you know? You did that, right? The writing. Like, what's one theme for you that popped up for you as you did your daily writing? Or is that too big?
No. It's a great question. It's a great question. And it's one of those ones that surprised me. Because when I was in high school, my favorite class was mathematics. Hands down. I mean, it was absolutely my favorite class. I loved it. I excelled. I got the math award at the end of my graduation, etc. But on Saturdays, my mother took me to an art class where I drew, I painted, I sculpted. And it took me looking at those two events, saying they were happening at the same time that the neural paths in my brain were forming. Well, what it told me was, that's why I'm what I call a bridge person. I can take people who talk theoretically and can translate that often to something much more practical. And I just do that very, very naturally. And I realized it came from those early experiences.
Nice. Yeah. Beautiful. It kind of reminds me also of this, like you say, two different parts of us, right? Math and art. You could see that in the body as well, that we have this thinking capacity and feeling capacity. To share a little bit more about embodiment. And I remember when I studied psychology and I said I did theoretical psychology, I was always like, where is that connection between the two? Where? And there are different neural pathways. So they don't really meet, but they alternate. Yeah. The thinking and the feeling. And we can have awareness about ourselves from a thinking perspective, right? Really analytical. As you say, if you pause and feel into it, and what else does this say about me?
Yeah.
Then you get the in the moment presence, in the moment experiencing yourself, which is always in the moment, right? It's not in the future or in the past.
Yeah.
Well, our reflective thinking pathway helps us connect the dots with the future and the past. So I'm not saying the thinking, skip that. It's more like up the volume on the embodied experience of your life. Because if you talk about living your life, that your life you aspire, for me, it's about ease. It's about fulfillment, and it's about joy. We're always thinking about what's to come and where are we? Where's the joy? Where's the ease? So that was a nice bridge, I think, to this super important phenomenon. It's important for us to understand what the reasoning is behind. Why would I need to feel my breath?
Yeah.
Why would I need to feel my breath? Why would I need to do all that? Why do I need to sit in silence? And one more little nugget about that is, using introspection, listening in to perceive what's happening in our body. A lot of that is, of course, automatic, right? When we run, we don't need to say to our heart, let's pump it up, right? That happens automatically. Thank goodness. But I, I like the saying, our body whispers, and to hear the signals, it's neurologically there. It's a little slower, and you need silence and stillness for that
Yeah.
to practice listening in. And it makes sense, right? Talking about Jane Goodall and biology, if there's some threat outside of us, that needs to be taken care of first.
Yeah.
But to know that, we don't have that much real threats, thank goodness, for, day to day, as we did when we didn't live in houses. So our system is still the same and taking care of our safety. But I would say we overdo it a little bit,
Yeah.
worrying about things that may not, our inbox being full and giving us stress be such a danger, in the long run. Yeah.
I loved that phrase that the signals from the body are slower than what's going on in our brains. And in today's society, we like things fast.
Mm-hmm. I do.
And that's a wonderful way to think about the fact that, okay, up here we're in a Porsche, but down here we're in a
Walking.
VW or something, or we're walking. Yes, but the messages are equally important. So just wait for it. Yeah. Oh, I love that.
And with a society that's prioritizing and analytical thinking, it's really a choice to shift to this different presence, different state of being.
Mm-hmm.
I always like that the human doing and the human being. Are you a human doing or a human being, right? and we're both, actually, right? We're both.
Right.
Which one of those do you give less attention?
Yeah.
That may be the reflective question to.
Very much so. I have to say this. When I go to the doctors, they'll tell me, okay, this is such and such. In fact, even my dentist was telling me this, different things that were happening to this tooth. And I said, it's okay. I will talk to the tooth. I will talk to my body. Well, he just rolled his eyes, of course. But I have always said that because it does respond slowly.
Mm-hmm.
But I like this now, but no, it's just slower.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of slower,
Mm-hmm.
I want us to, can we do something right now to demonstrate to the audience?
Oh, I love that question because talking about it is like that is one thing, but experiencing it is a whole different thing. Yeah. So let's do a little practice that that kind of shows, and I won't give it away at all, but that kind of shows the interrelatedness of our mood, our thinking, our presence, and all that. So it's a very simple practice, and everyone can join it because I think you'll notice more if you do it along with us. And you're not on screen, so why not? So for the first part of it is to really slouch down. That will be a surprise, right? Because I'm a yoga teacher who's slouching down. Bring your shoulders, curl your shoulders a little bit forward. Your head is down. Maybe a little bit squeezing in the eyebrows. Turn your lips downward, so like the opposite of a smile. I really feel so your heart is caved in. No energy. Allow the energy to just dissipate. Be in that for a moment. And then say out loud. So Madelyn, I'm going to ask you to do it out loud. Say out loud, I am so excited.
I am so excited.
And then take a moment to notice how, and you can slowly come back up to sit up straight. Just take a moment to notice how that lands. And then raise your arms up. You can see my full arms, but raise your arms up. Open your heart, breathe into your heart, smile. I feel so sad. Yeah.
I don't feel sad.
Right. That's what your body screams. No, you're not. You're lying. And that's, what that says, it says a lot. But what that says is like, you can't fake your mood, right? And the mood starts from like this certain shaping.
Yeah.
As a leader, right? and everyone leads their life. So that's true for everyone. But as a leader, the mood you bring into an organization, to a session, to a meeting, it's going to be felt. You don't need to speak to it as you can feel it. We're social creatures. We're interdependent. We cannot do it by ourselves.
Yeah.
So that mood will resonate in the room. And if you're faking it, if you're like, I'll just put on a mask, it doesn't work. It's not good for you, and it's not trustworthy. So what did you make of that?
That was a very interesting exercise, because when you said, when we're down here like this, to say, I am excited, I began with a strong I, but then I couldn't finish.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. I thought, no.
Yeah.
So when you came back up like this, I couldn't say I'm sad, because I wasn't sad.
And it's interesting because I heard you kind of with a voice of, I need to say this, that it's I don't know, there was something about like taking a stand for that, what you said, I'm so excited, while you clearly weren't. And I also noticed there was some kind of like, and tell me if I'm wrong, but maybe pushing through, like, I'll just say it.
Oh, yes,
say it,
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you gave me an instruction. I will follow instruction.
And that in a mini kind of how things show up to live the life you aspire, is to go with the expectations, right? In this setting, I'm asking you to do something. You're doing it because that's social convention, right? I'm here with you. We're doing things together here. So you're doing that. And you're pushing through while your body kind of whispers maybe, no, you're not. You're not excited. And I'm not saying, there's no place for kind of, okay, I need to show up and I can't bring everything, always to the workplace. But I think the acknowledgement that how we show up in our mood, it impacts others. If you know that, that might be a motivator to start working on. So how can I become more aligned with what's happening in my body? How can I take those pauses in the morning? Let's sit for 5 minutes. Let's sit for 10 minutes. And if you will, an hour in silence and stillness, and check in with myself.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me so much of some of the training that I've had on how to present yourself, in particular, presenting yourself on stage. And there's, of course, a classic exercise where you assume the role of an animal.
Uh-huh.
And, I tried this and I tried that. And I discovered that the animal that I choose to embody when I get ready to present, or have this show, talk on stage, wherever it is, is, believe it or not, a giraffe. I know that sounds kind of weird, but it's the animal that for me makes sense. And so it's exactly this. I feel it entirely in my body. And you can tell I'm even sitting differently now that I've been talking about being this giraffe.
So Madelyn, what does that giraffe give you as how does it help you to feel the giraffe before you go and on this show?
When I'm working hard, this is what happens. Well, not to this extreme, but all these muscles are working because you're very focused on the keyboard, or even on the phone. There is always the tension to do what you have to do. But when I come onto the show, I don't want to have my audience worry about me being tense. I mean, that's ridiculous. And so I invite the giraffe, who, I mean, there isn't even any shoulders to a giraffe. I just thought of that.
Yeah, that's right. I love it. So it gives you permission maybe to drop your shoulders and to have that extension in your neck. Yeah.
And it isn't even permission. It just happens.
Well, permission, holding that lightly. It's as you prepare yourself. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I'll ponder on what my animal would be after the show.
Well, you have to try it though.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
You have to walk around in it. And You have to make sounds. That's the other thing about a giraffe. They don't make very much sound.
Oh,
So
really?
anyway, doesn't matter. That's the one that works for me. All right. Now, oh gosh, there's so many things I want to ask you. Or maybe we'll have you come back. But what is a major challenge in your life? Some disruption that you've had to overcome? And how did you do that?
Mm. Well, luckily my life has been pretty smooth. But I did have, I told in the beginning that I ended up in this domain of embodied leadership, somatic coaching, working through the body, teaching yoga, which was for me a part of the story. But then we have, as you say, narrative. So how is that integrated? And in somatics and in embodied leadership, we don't just look at the body, we also look at stories. So I ran into myself. That was a major event, like in my early 40s. I ran into my patterning of, and I talked a little about this in the Life You Aspire, pushing through, very willpowered. It was so interesting that at that time I didn't even know that I was super sensitive, which I am. I did suffer kind of the impact of that because I was at that time doing, holding leadership teams in big change operations and how, culture and all that. But so then you can imagine a lot happening on such team meetings that I then took with me. And I it kind of really, I owned it. I couldn't see this is not mine because I just felt it. So long story short, that got to a point where I totally didn't know how to continue. And I had young kids. My work was, 45 minutes and to an hour away. I know that doesn't sound like much in the US, but in the Netherlands,
it's huge.
A country the size of Maryland, right? So so the challenge was really, how do I relax? Because I went to a physical therapist because of course I get shoulder issues then, and of course my neck starts to hurt. You just talked about how important it is to open up there, and he did a practice where he really squeezed hard, and I was like, okay, I'll wait till you're done. And he was like, why didn't you tell me to stop? I'm like, well, you're doing this, so I thought it was good for something. But the point was, am I able, as I feel like a pressure from the outside, am I able to soften in that?
Yeah.
And I wasn't. And then at night, I was in bed and I was lying and I was like, okay, I'm going to relax my body. And I'm like, how do I do this? I couldn't do it. And there was a lot of suffering at that time. I was so on edge and I could get upset, at stupid things. So it was clear to me that challenge, I needed to do things differently. At that time, like it's like 15 years ago or so, I didn't know anything about embodied leadership or somatics. And I'm sure there's some people, right, that were working on that field. But in the Netherlands, I think it's just now starting to get more popular and known. So I went to a therapist who did cognitive behavioral therapy. Well, the wisdom of the body was fascinating because after a few sessions, I felt nauseous leaving there.
Wow.
And I realized this is emphasizing an old pattern of just living here.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was only running circles in my head and I didn't get anywhere. So, I mean, as you asked in the opening, what brought you to this field? I mean, that moment, I didn't know then yet how, if I'd known where I'd be now, I would be super surprised because I didn't know that this will lead me to like a 15-year exploration and journey in myself. And then also, bringing that into the world.
Oh, marvelous. Yeah. Marvelous. Well, there are many people in my audience. In fact, there's a whole chunk of them that are really, as I look at the stats that I get, because I want to know who's out there so I can speak more relevantly.
Yeah.
Who are early in their careers. Some at mid-career, at moments like you just described.
Mhm.
What advice would you give them so that they can anticipate those moments and be
Yeah,
ready?
yeah. And I love that you're asking for advice. As a coach, I'm not allowed to give advice, but I'm not coaching here, so I can give advice.
That's right.
And I think it's really valuable in coaching because everyone has the wisdom to answer their own questions, right? But yeah, I think, I mean, a big reason why this work is so important to me, because I think there's a lot of I suffered because I didn't know how to get out of it. And I think there's no need to suffer. There will be pain, but the suffering, if you know a pathway through this, the suffering is not so necessary in my mind. Um, and I think the advice is super simple and yet hard to do. Is develop a pause practice. Develop a pause practice so that you tap in and you allow yourself, you give yourself permission to wonder. So I have this task before me. What about that is important to me? Because there's usually a choice how you are going to do the work, right? There's emphasis you can put. There's like things to consider. What matters to me? Your work, it may be, it's a bit of a luxury, but even no matter what work you do, how can you make it so that you do the things that are resonating with what's important to you? And if you find that's not happening at your work, maybe it's time to look for something else, because live the life you aspire. Fun thing is I also taught kids yoga, like, and I always said to them, you know what's really true for you. Of course, other people who care about you can feel that too, but there's something special about us tapping into our own hearts and what matters to us. So I really say do a pause practice. And as you practice it, as I say, offline, so meaning by yourself in your room with no one there, then take it into the daily life. So you're washing the dishes, you're cleaning up, you're doing work, whatever you're doing, work life, private life, take moments of pause.
Mm.
And before a meeting, before you change. So to reconnect to what matters, that's a foundational start of a shift where you not only live from your smart head that we all need, but also from a sense of embodiment and a presence, right? Leadership presence is a practice. It's not just, okay, I'm not going to play a leader. No, it's your presence. And this pause practice is foundational.
I now have a new set of words. Pause
Mhm.
practice. I love it. You know, in my work, I tell people take 5 minutes a day.
Mm,
I say in silence, and what I really mean is uninterrupted time. So
yeah.
that and people ask, well, should I pray? I said, if you want to. Should I meditate? If you want to. The point is to just give you uh, develop the practice of doing this. But I love this is an addition to that.
Mm,
That yes, that those are moments of real collection. I do use my 5 minutes at the beginning of the day. I use 5 minutes at the end of the day, and it really helps me to collect my life.
can I
But
can I say one small thing about that?
yeah, yeah,
Addition is that so there's one thing to look out for in that practice is to make it embodied, because we can sit five
yes,
minutes and totally
yeah,
go
yeah,
out of
yeah,
body,
yeah,
like, oh, this is great. That's, if you need that, that's also fine, but don't miss out on being in your body. And the real practice there actually is to notice when you're not, because it will happen over and over and over
yes,
and over again.
yeah,
You're going up in thinking, you're distracted by this, by that. It's all right. That's life happening. Bring
yeah.
yourself back. So the practice is mostly bringing yourself back to being
Ah,
present in your body.
beautiful addition.
Mm,
Beautiful addition. Actually, that is a. I find, or I have found, that is what has happened over time as I've used this practice. You're
yeah.
you're you have some native intelligence in your body,
Hmm.
and it reminds you. It comes the message is slow, as you say, but it comes through. This is fabulous. I am I am just so thrilled that we had this conversation. I've learned pause practice. I've learned that our body is our social domain of action. I love that. It's a great way to describe the body.
Hmm.
And that you have a simple definition of embodiment, which is just to sit still and observe ourselves. Um, and lastly, oh yes, this I love, and I'm going to add it to my work as well.
Mm.
Before they write their stories, to do this simple exercise of breathing to see if they get what comes up out of their bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, to bring Jane Goodall back, because she's so.
Yeah.
I mean, one other thing I think why she's also an embodiment of hope is that she was in nature all day long.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing that brings us resilience and an embodied presence, it's nature. So if I give one more piece of advice, sneak it in, is that go out and see trees and be in the green.
Yeah. During lockdowns during the pandemic, I always told people the only thing that's keeping me feeling calm and centered is because I can go out and walk in my gardens.
Yeah, I saw that. And I've seen your gardens, and I can understand that it gives you.
Yeah, they really were. Well, Marietta, this has been just a wonderful conversation, and I thank you so much for your time and for your expertise and sharing it so fully with our audience. I really appreciate that. And we've had, in a way, many last words, but I always love to give my guests the chance to say any final. Oh, no, wait. Before you do that, let me just remind them. You mentioned that you have a newsletter.
Oh, yeah.
How do they sign up for that?
Yeah, it's just on LinkedIn. If you connect to me on LinkedIn, Marietta, my last name. Yeah, I didn't write. So my last name is Vis. VIS, V as in Victor. So yeah, on LinkedIn, I post my newsletter.
Okay.
Love to see you there. And I always share like a personal story and then how this relates to the journey of embodiment. So
that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is that you have this new project of Live the Life You Aspire. When is that going to begin?
So my first group is going to begin end of September. It's almost filled up. There's a few openings, but it's going to be small group work so we can go in depth. And we're really going to do this. That's where this is going to happen. Exploring, what is it that you long for? What's holding you back? And how does that show up? And how can you access that through the body? So I'm super excited about it. It feels it's work from my heart. Really.
Wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Marietta, thank you again so much.
And thank you, Madelyn. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Wow. I don't know about you guys, but I'm really excited about what I learned today. And I keep thinking of the tremendous numbers of parallels between Marietta's work and the work that I do for individuals. Of course, I focus on resilience. She has a almost broader perspective, but still very complementary. So, well, I really love that Marietta talks about practices also, because as you know, when I talk about Unlocked, I really say that a practice is something you do not for the sake of the practice, but for a larger purpose. And as I listened to Marietta, I saw the same emphasis that we need practices to help us achieve so much more. And what I gained from her is that just the practice of sitting in silence and breathing and getting in touch with our bodies, and that's the first practice I talk about in my book, although the body part has been sort of added today, can be extended to not just silence, but taking the same time to listen to your body. The amazing, I call it the carrier, excuse me, that allows us to live and breathe in this world. And what it means to you is that you now have more choices from which to choose for your own practice of silence. And now you, my goodness, I think, let me take some water here. And now you're able to use those choices to nurture your resilience while you also aspire for the life that you hope for. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Unlocked, and I hope you'll make a comment in social media about what you learned and might do differently. So please check out my book, Unlocked, on Amazon for practices that actually work. So I want to thank you again for joining this segment of Unlocked. I'm Madelyn Blair. I'm wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilience.